Villains can be anything that you as a writer could think of. Even as an audience member, I'm sure you guys have a lot of great ideas. For all intents and purposes, it's just a manufactured conflict, a way to get your heroes to act in a certain way by pushing them to deal with circumstances that causes their character to shine through. Yes, we love our trickster characters, our tyrants, our fallen hero villain archetypes. Those characters are fun, but at the end of the day, it doesn't all have to be serious. It can be about the jokes. It doesn't have to be all that deep, you feel me? And when it comes to joke villains, it could be anything from a wall, it could be a giant wheel, it could be a guy with a bunch of condiments on his hip and he just starts blasting. There isn't exactly a format of how to approach these villains because you can just do whatever you want. For the most part, they don't really test the hero from an intelligence standpoint, from a physical standpoint, even from an emotional standpoint. It's just all good fun. And if it's not that, it's a good introspective gateway into the human mind, how we could relate to them. Not me, because I'm not a criminal, but some people are just very down on their luck and they'll just do anything to get the bag. Or if not that, maybe they're just a villain with a cool or just weird gimmick and they just want to show it off. They just commit crime just because they have powers and like, you know what, I might as well do something with it, you know, the ball is in my hand, might as well shoot it, you know. That is a valid mindset. But either way, in this video I want to talk about the greatest joke villains in my opinion. Not joke villains that are like well known. I know a lot of people, I just mentioned before the Wall, of course Big Wheel, Spider-Man villains, Eraser's pretty cool, but he's not really used that much. Condiment King, he came from Batman the Animated Series. So yes, these characters are funny. Yes, they're really cool in these one-off blink or you miss it moments when they just show up for like a tiny bit. But are they really the best? Not really, they're just fun to see here and there. I couldn't really name you 5 character traits of them, just that they're funny to see get beat up. You know what I mean? Polka Dot Man is in there too. Yes, James Gunn did make Polka Dot Man a lot cooler in the Suicide Squad with all of his weird visions of like his mom and stuff like that. But is he really one of the best? I don't think so. But just remember guys, this is my list. Feel free to leave yours down in the comments down below. And yeah, let's get straight into the video. Now, in general, Batman has some of the best joke villains of all time. He has the best rogues gallery for a reason. I know a lot of people like to argue that Batman's rogues gallery isn't all that, it's overrated, which is easy to say because they're at the top and everybody knows them. You're just salty, okay? Just admit it. Your favorite character doesn't have quite a gallery as Batman does. The A-listers, the B-listers, even some of the C-listers have motion, right? They have something to go off of, something to carry their rep. Maybe a story or two that shows their true potential. I had to go through the list, okay? These guys, in my opinion, are the best because they get revamped a lot in recent Batman media to become better than what they were in the Silver Age. So yeah, let's get straight into the first villain, and that is Kite Man. Now, as you might expect, Kite Man debuted during the Silver Age of Batman comics, and if you know anything about Batman, that was the goofy era. The rainbow Batman suit, the zebra Batman suit, he was fighting a firefly that had a bunch of weird lasers, he wasn't even an arsonist. He was getting folded into a piece of paper origami style, just floating in the wind, about to fly into the sun. There are so many. Zur-En-Arrh Batman, he was a different Batman from an alien world, and when humans go onto that alien world, they get superpowers. And by the way, what type of shrooms do you have to be on to come up with a name called Zur-En-Arrh? That doesn't even make any sense. But yes, Kite Man, he used high-powered kites to escape, attack. He had like flashlight kites that were like flashbangs. He had explosive kites. He just flew around like a dollar store vulture for the most part. He was just very absurd, not exactly the most threatening in any way of the imagination, but he was kind of a lovable loser. Now that brings us to today, when Kite Man is so popular that he even got his own show spin-off off of the Harley Quinn series called Kite Man Hell Yeah. But you might be asking yourself, why would they call something Hell Yeah? Just because it's funny? Like, really guys, is that all you could do? No, it's because Tom King reinvented the character in the War of Jokes and Riddles arc in his Batman storyline around like the 25-32-ish issue mark is when this kind of happened, and it went over his entire origin story and how he played a very big part in the early days of Batman. Now, in the War of Jokes and Riddles, obviously as the name suggests, Joker and Riddler, they were at war and they just enlisted a bunch of villains to be on their side to do this weird back and forth fights where they took over territory and blah blah blah. What we're really here for is my goat, Charles Chuck Brown. Now, Kite Man under Tom King is very interesting because he kind of gets rid of the camp aspect of them trying to make his character into a joke villain, and he plays it straight. Obviously, he's unintentionally funny just because of his gimmick, but in the story, he's played out as a struggling father, a former engineer, who just wanted to take care of his son, who wanted to make money. He used his engineering degree and everything he knew to build kites so he can rob banks. But he does do a little bit more than that. He builds suits and gadgets for villains, kind of like a side hustle to pay the bills. He gets roped into working with the Joker, thinking that it'll be like a kind of quick little easy job here just for me to get my money. But Riddler, he hears about that during the War of Jokes and Riddles, and obviously, you know, it's a very cutthroat type of organization, because you're either with or against the little two leaders here in this rival faction war. But when the Riddler finds out, he poisons one of the kites that Charles gives to his son, Charles Jr., and that moment just shatters him, and his entire saying, "Kite Man, hell yeah," that was made in this arc. And he just embraces the identity of Kite Man after his son dies, kind of like a coping mechanism. Something that was very, I guess, stupid and like laughable, it becomes like a mantra, like an oath. Kind of like when you look at the Green Lantern Corps and their little "in brightest day and blackest night" is a way for them to lock in. It was a way for Kite Man to mask his pain. He's left trying to force the world into making sense, to take him seriously, because this is all that he has now. He starts wearing the costume, flying straight into battles, getting beat up over and over again, being used by Batman to be a puzzle piece in his greater game to take down these evil villain organizations that are fighting against each other. Villains themselves, they use him as cannon fodder, and he lets them because that's how he makes his money. He gets mocked repeatedly, but that catchphrase is like armor. It's a shell to keep him protected from anything that would hurt him deep down. He knows he's a loser, he knows that he's nothing, but maybe, just maybe, by holding on to this one phrase, he can hold his head above the waves. It's a story about grief, loss, absurd tragedy, all of the hallmarks that Tom King is known for. He kind of played with his magic in this moment. Not a lot of people are big Tom King fans. I'm not the biggest Tom King fan myself, but I admit when he makes magic. And he did a really good job with Kite Man, even when Batman used him and manipulated him to be that long con to get rid of the Riddler and Joker enterprises, kind of planting him as a snitch for information. Charles is well aware of it. He is smart, and I'm pretty sure Batman knew that he was going to figure that out too. But he also counted on the fact that all Charles wants is to get revenge on Riddler. He will do anything. He weaponizes the fact that people underestimate him. It's kind of like a Batman situation, but used in the Batman world context. And what I mean by that is that, you know how Batman, when he's in the world of gods and monsters, right, in the Justice League fighting against big threats, a lot of the big bads underestimate him, and he uses that to plan, to strategize, to find their weakness and use it against them in their moment of weakness. He waits for the best moment there is to strike. Kite Man does the same thing in Gotham, a world where a lot of people don't have powers, so it looks even worse when mere humans are looking down upon you. But at the end of the day, he's not really looking for redemption. He's just really a broken man trying to navigate his way through all the madness around him, because that is all he has. A costume to carry him through each and every broken day. And because of that, he's a very sympathetic character that a lot of people can relate to. Now, for this next character, I'm gonna have to be a little bit of a time machine and bring us back to our childhood. Maybe your childhood, maybe mine, I don't know. Who knows? I'm joking, we all grew up with this, but yeah, let's freeze the air a little bit, pull it back, and voila, look what's in front of your face. Memories, oh my goodness. Lego Batman. This is the game that brought a lot of our attention to Batman's villains, right? There was a complete game mode, well, kind of like an alternate game mode where you played from the villain's perspective, and that was just pure fun. And if you guys don't know who I'm going to talk about, you're a fake fan. Pause the video, think about it, and come back. You done yet? It's Batman's Dark Reflection. Killer Moth. The best Batman villain of all time. Dude, he's so goofy. His costume is just whack. Just purple, green, and orange, striped pants. In the game, what made him really funny, what made a lot of us endear to his character, is that he was a complete joke in the game as well, compared to all the other villains. Which says something, considering that it is a Lego game and everybody is goofy. He was always going to the lamps, like a moth, and is completely hitting his head over and over and over again. He was enamored by every single light that was around him, and I can't really blame him. Perfectly understandable, I love those Lego blocks too. But as a character, what made him really cool in the Silver Age, and what made him kind of a joke, is that he was Batman's opposite to a T. He had a moth cave, a moth mobile, a moth signal, and his entire motif was being, this is really cool by the way, and if they made this into a modern story, it would be tight, but his original purpose was to be Batman for criminals. And what that means is that Batman, as you know, he protects citizens. But what if you're able to hire Killer Moth and make him a protection service for Gotham's criminals? He was the Batman for criminals. He saved criminals. That is so cool. And he had a cocoon gun, and one of the first sightings I saw of Killer Moth, other than from the Lego game, was this Easter egg in Batman Arkham Asylum where he cocooned somebody to the wall of one of the catacombs, and they were stuck there, and we only saw the aftermath where they were literally a skeleton. He isn't somebody who's known for killing, but if you were left there for a long enough period of time and nobody went to check on you, yes, you would you would die, as you might expect. I don't think I have to tell you that, but probably his most infamous story was with Batgirl and Batgirl Year One, and it was just a rehash of his origin and all the stuff that he really had to go through. It grounds him a bit more. You feel more sorry for him because he's somebody who's very down on his luck trying to build up his respect, but nobody really seems to like him. He built up his business through criminal protection services, but unfortunately, he was fumbling a lot. When there was more heroes coming into play, he was messing up more. People didn't want to hire him. He had this really, I don't know if he bought a big mansion or he bought a good place or he was just spending his money a lot, but he took way more than he could handle and he was losing money really quickly, and he was going to lose where he lived and stuff like that. So when desperate times come, desperate measures need to be taken, and what he did was meet his partner in crime, Firefly. Firefly was the exact person he needed to build his respect up, because not only is fire a very deadly weapon and everybody's afraid of fire, that's everyone's weakness. I know Martian Manhunter feels a little bit sorry, yet he is sorry for having that as a weakness, but can I really blame him if everybody can die by fire? Like, even if the Flash, if you let the Flash stay in one spot long enough, he would die by that too, and he's one of the most powerful beings in comics. If he let that happen, he would die. Superman not so much, but Firefly had that dog in him. He was a murderous psychopath, more so of an arsonist who didn't really care about the consequences of burning things down. He was so blank-faced into this interpretation that you couldn't really tell what he was thinking, but you know he was a thinker. Everything that he said was very methodical, and he was taking crime to the next level, to the point where Killer Moth could not really contend. He was like, what are you doing, bro? You are doing too much. I can't really hang with you because me as a person, I don't really like killing. You just do it with no regard of human life. I'm not really about that life, you know, getting down and dirty, so I'm just gonna have to distance myself away from you, and then a whole kerfluffle happened between them, my favorite word, I said it again, and they ended up being at odds, and I'm pretty sure Firefly almost killed him. So yeah, Killer Moth is mad sorry, and that's why we love him. Then in the 90s, in the Underworld Unleashed event, the devil of the DC Universe after like Lucifer, long story, either way, the new ruler of hell, Neuron, gave villains powers if they were able to make a deal with him. If you made a deal with the devil, you would get more powers. And what happened in this storyline with Drury Walker, there you go, he became a chrysalis, and then he expanded, and then he became a being known as Charaxus. He was a very grotesque moth-like figure. He had wings, he had claws, he had acid, goo, spit, whatever, and he had cannibalistic urges. He was, for all intensive purposes, a horror movie villain. He starts killing people. He doesn't normally like doing that, and he eats them until there's literally nothing left. His humanity, his identity, all of it, gone. His speech, he can't even speak. He just starts grumbling and growling to get his point across. And what I really like about this version and Killer Moth in general is that he ticks the little itch that I have of there being more horror movie villains. Villains that make our main hero forced to run away, to hide, to use their brain to outthink the villain so that they could have a fighting chance. That is the tension that I love in comic books. And there's not enough new villains like that, or even old villains, because all the old villains, their tricks have been seen by the heroes multiple times and can be counteracted. But dude, when Charaxus first appeared and Tim Drake had to deal with him by himself, that was a problem. This man got stuck in a cocoon and was there for a day, I'm pretty sure. And usually 2 people are needed to actually defeat him in this form. In his normal form, he's good too. He's probably the best in that form. I'm very grateful that the Charaxus kind of era was very short-lived, because seeing Killer Moth just be sad and crying and trying to be taken seriously, what I love about it is that he feels like a self-insert, like a character from our world just plopped into the world of superheroes. Like, they wouldn't know what to do, but they're like, you know what? I have an opportunity here. I'm not gonna be like a Tony Stark, Bruce Wayne type of person. I'm not gonna make that kind of money. I don't really have the brain for it, but what if I get a bunch of super villain, cool, crazy like costumes and weaponry and try to rob banks? Maybe my business pitch is being Batman but for criminals. He just seems like he has the thought process of somebody from our world going into DC, which is what I love. Great character. They should really do more with him. I love whenever he's on screen. Just such a relatable, not really, I'm not a criminal, but he's a goofy guy. We love him. Now, moving on to another Batman villain, I want to talk about the Ten-Eyed Man. So, this character, he's just so goofy. He has like a very serious backstory, but then it just goes off the rails. So, his name was like Philip Reardon, brain work please, I think. And he was like a Vietnam War veteran who suffered like this kind of eye injury while working as this kind of warehouse security guard. So he's blinded, right? This explosion happens, he doesn't have sight anymore. And this doctor surgically reattaches his optic nerves to his fingertips. And here we go. This is the guy we see. And he sees through his hands. I don't know why I'm making this into a melody, but he has 360-degree awareness now. He can move his hands all over the place, and he can see anything. And how does Batman defeat him? How would you defeat him? I don't know, by punching his hands consistently. That's what I would do, and that's what Batman does. Like, anytime he touches anything too hot, sharp, bright, it will blind him. It will hurt him. And look at his design too. It's just like, if I could produce question marks in real life, it would happen looking at Ten-Eyed Man. He was killed in Crisis on Infinite Earths. They knew they were onto nothing, but then he got revamped twice, mind you, and both of them were pretty cool. The second one is my favorite though, and it's the current version, who's in 2 really good Batman books. And honestly, I was so obsessed with the Ten-Eyed Man, it's not even funny. Like, I'm telling you, this reinvention is Mr. Freeze levels of sauce, okay? But the first one was by Grant Morrison in 52, and in his Batman run. And what he does is that he reintroduces him and recontextualizes him, which is what he's known best for, right? And it's now called, what it is the Ten-Eyed Brotherhood, and it's a cult based in Yemen. And it's reimagined as this mystic, sight beyond sight, spiritual, cosmic vision, right? That's who he is. He's no longer just a guy with 10 eyes on his hands. He claims to have this sort of universal perception through like mutilation enlightenment. He's connected to the Ouroboros, which, as you know, if you read Batman Incorporated, that is a huge part of that run, right? Death, reincarnation, a snake eating its tail and going around in a loop. He's no longer really a punchline, he's a prophet, right? Imagine a blind man who sees too much. Batman can't really fight him. He doesn't fight him. He warns you about stuff, kind of like a precog. Is there a word for that? Let me search up. Power for seeing in the future. Yeah, precog, okay. Now, the second version was from Dan Watters and Ram V. Now, Dan Watters did this through his Arkham City Order of the World event. 6 issues, really good. And then to his Detective Comics run, which is with Ram V as well. And they did that through the Gotham Nocturne arc. And honestly, in my opinion, the current sort of era of Batman is one of my favorites. People are very obsessed on the main Batman run and Detective Comics. I haven't read Detective by Tom Taylor. Batman is pretty trash right now. But as a whole, it really brings me back to the Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle of being very street level but very like supernatural. And this is the reading list, okay? Off the top of my head. Catwoman by Ram V, Arkham City Order of the World by Dan Watters, Sword of Azrael by Dan Watters, Batman Detective Comics by Ram V and Dan Watters. I'm putting you on right now. And then after that, you can read this whenever. Batman Dark Patterns by Dan Watters, Poison Ivy by G. Willow Wilson, Batman City of Madness by Christian Ward, then Two-Face by Christian Ward, and if you want to add some spices for good measure, put in Batman and Robin by Philip Kennedy Johnson. That right there is some good Batman eats. And even more, Batman and Robin Year 1. You're set. That's all you need. And if you want more, read the current Batgirl run. And if you want more, read Nightwing by Dan Watters. Okay, let me stop. I'm glazing too much. Why didn't any of you guys stop me? But this version of the Ten-Eyed Man, what makes him special is that, just look at his costume. He's like the horror movie villains that I'm talking about that I like. It's just so cool. He's very flexible. And his eyes, look at the eyes on his hands. They do different things. We don't know what they all do. And it kind of plays with the fact that he might or might not be insane and his powers might just be a joke. But there's more evidence of it actually being true than not. But what makes it really cool, this new version of the Ten-Eyed Man, is that he has this sort of hyper-perception. He doesn't just see like physical objects, but he also sees ideas, emotions, spiritual auras, the future, your soul. He has this true sight. He sees the world as it is, unfiltered by human illusion or any sort of logic that might actually dull down your senses, that bring you down into a state of ignorance. You don't want that, and he doesn't have that. He has a sort of mystic knowledge. He's kind of like a preacher, quoting certain scriptures, some sort of monologues about order, madness, and in general, he's a central protagonist in the Arkham City Order of the World story, and what makes it really cool is that he's not really a traditional villain. There is no traditional villains in this book, just a bunch of inmates putting themselves in positions to live a normal life, but they really can't, or maybe to cause as much havoc as they can, but they're just imprisoned beyond their will, and they have this certain mental illness or power that prevents them from being integrated into society properly. The story itself, it really focuses on Arkham. He doesn't really consider it just a place, he considers it a cathedral, a place that has been taken over and corrupted by madness. He looks at Gotham as a living organism. He even speaks to it, which is really cool. Just gathering all the history needed, seeing the hole in the world, and trying to fix it up, or just letting chaos reign supreme. He has very weird motives. He speaks like a, I don't want to say a psychopath, maybe a schizophrenic is probably the best word, but he doesn't really try to kill, but he does take people's eyes. He has this whole like eyeball collection that's kind of goofy in a very morbid way, seeing him run away with a bunch of eyes like carrying it in his arms. But he sees through like even lies. When he touches somebody, which is really cool, is that he can read their entire history, their trauma, their sins. His eyes are wounded, they're twitching, just like what he sees Gotham as, right? It's a city with nerves, organs, and it is in pain, something that was wounded by insanity, not healed by it, and he doesn't even see himself as insane. He sees himself as somebody who is sane enough to listen to what Gotham actually wants. And that's what makes him really cool, this very occult messiah type of person who doesn't really have anybody really following him, but he puts himself in this really weird position while also being very goofy and funny, and borderline very scary. So yeah, current day 10-Eyed Man is one of the greats in my opinion, and no one is gonna tell me otherwise. And for the last Batman villain we'll be talking about, it is Calendar Man. Now he's went through a crazy reinvention that I think a lot of you guys know about it, but I had to include him on this list because it was really good. And the good thing about his reinvention is that it occurs in the very beginning of a lot of your favorite Batman arcs of the Batman storyline, right? A lot of the great Calendar Man stuff would be at the very beginning of your reading orders, specifically in Long Halloween and Dark Victory. So respect is already put on Calendar Man's name very early on, right? It's in year 2, year 3, and in the reading order, you'll be looking at that first. So yeah, I felt like I didn't really need to include this, but just for the sake of the game, and because everyone would be asking, let's talk about Calendar Man. Now, he really started off as, look at his costume. He has a calendar as a cape. He said a lot of corny things, like even more than what I say, and it usually has something to do with the weather or the season or I don't know, whatever holiday it is. And let me think of a pun. I got it. Try not to cringe. Check this out. Prepare to fall like autumn leaves. Oh, I'm hilarious. Okay. But he was basically Batman if he went to Party City, because this fit was not it. And the reason why it really didn't work is because all the other Batman villains, they have strong symbolism or iconography in one way or the other. Joker, Riddler, Two-Face. You can see everything working out without it being too on the nose. Calendar Man, he had no powers, no scary presence, and his crimes weren't even that dangerous. Writers didn't take him seriously, the viewers didn't take him seriously. He was just another run-of-the-mill villain of the week. Nothing really that special, just for Batman to do for that publication cycle, right? The writers are really having a problem creating enough conflict for Batman, and they're like, you know what, I don't want to use the same villain over and over and over again, might as well try to create something new. And it's always a good thing when writers take risks, even if they are perceived to be really bad in the moment, because there's always other writers who can give them a glow up, who can reinvent the wheel and make them into a better character, give them more of a motif to stand out, rather than being left in the back of the line. And in Long Halloween and Dark Victory by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, obviously very iconic storylines, he works almost as a consultant for Batman in Arkham. He's already captured, he has a bunch of calendars on the wall, it's usually the inspiration for the Batman Arkham games and how the character is used in that, but he is a little Hannibal Lecter, right, teasing Batman about this so-called holiday killer, giving him certain clues and hints here and there and very cryptic offerings and riddles in a way. Just being very, very withheld and conscious about the things that he says, because he sees it as a game, right? It's his game actually, because of what the killer is doing is literally his entire MO. So he was probably like, let me have a little bit of fun with this. And I love in the animated film, he speaks in such a very eerie, detached tone. He doesn't feel real. He has this obsession with holidays. It feels kind of ritualistic. But since he's in Arkham, he doesn't really act anything. He waits because he really knows that time is on his side. Nothing really feels scary to him. He feels very calm, observant, intelligent, and manipulative. He uses words very well, and for a bitter and calculating man as Julian Day, you could see how this could be really a problem if he was actually let out, right? We only see him, that's the cool thing, we only see him behind bars. We don't even perceive what he would be able to do outside of those confined walls, which probably is for the best. In Dark Victory, another kind of calendar type villain does appear, and it does make him really angry that this happens because he's just obsessed with being remembered in a way, right? And these villains are just taking away his spotlight. He's a villain rooted in jealousy and kind of, I guess, irrelevance. He wants to be relevant. He didn't really have any problems being behind bars for the first time. For the second time, he's like, okay guys, you're playing it up a bit too much now. Let me have some time to shine. But yeah. In the New 52 and Rebirth, it's a very odd way of looking at the character. I don't know if I like it, but as I've said before, it does allow me to scratch the little horror movie body horror itch that I do have, right? And in this alternate version of this character, he now sheds his skin and dies every year, being reborn with a new seasonal cycle. And each version of him carries memories and deepens his obsession with the march of time, and that sounds really cool. And they should have honestly done more with him. This is another one of Tom King's reinventions, which is kind of cool. But honestly, I would rather prefer it was just a normal man. But, you know, we have enough of those, and maybe it's time to see something new. Very supernatural, very eerie, but still a joke to the Bat family. When you see him like in action, like the husk of the skin, he kind of looks like a snake for the most part when he goes through this little transformation. It is kind of cool. He does have this really cool quote that I remember. It goes like, he dies in the winter, he's reborn in spring, he grows strong in the summer, and he plans for fall. That is a hard bar. I will give you that. That is good. That is really good. But yeah, let's move on to our next character. Now, this character I was debating for a long time, but it just makes the most sense. It's Herman Schultz. That's such a goofy... that name is good. Shocker. It's the Shocker. And if you look at his costume, yeah, it's kind of cool, you know, vibro shock gauntlets, a mechanical genius, career criminal. He has the entire spreadsheet, right? His LinkedIn probably looks kind of good from first glance, but the branding, look at the suit, look how quilted it looks. He's kind of like a giant waffle man. Like, it's not exactly flattering to the eyes in general. The insulation obviously is needed for the suit, but he gets regularly destroyed by Spider-Man. He makes Spider-Man look good. He has no rep. He's just the goofball. Does he have good stories though? Yes, he does. I really did love, I'm pretty sure it was called Emergency Stop by Mark Waid during the Brand New Day era. That was good. I really liked that. It really showed Spider-Man for who he truly is. And I really loved, what's the moniker he gives him? Shocky. Like, he makes just a bunch of dumb names for Herman. It's always fun to see. But what makes him actually great is that he's very consistent. While other joke villains tend to vanish, he's been such a staple to the Spider-Man mythos that he's always there. He's kind of stupid sometimes while also being very smart. His contradictions is what makes him so just why we pity him so much, because he knows he's a loser, but he kind of owns it, you know? He plays a straight man to a lot of the losers that would be around him as well, because he finds himself in very convenient and familiar company. But yeah, he's just tired of losing. If we can go to like a couple of his stories, I'm pretty sure in the first story he ever appeared in, which was like Spider-Man... Amazing Spider-Man number 46. Check me if I'm right. If I'm right on this, somebody owes me like 5... No, I'm joking. But it was called like the Sinister Shocker or something like that. And Peter kind of looking at him like a mini-boss, right? He wasn't even the real story, just an obstacle. He beats him up trying to rob the bank. He makes fun of him. He gets humiliated. And he just moves on to the next one. He's nothing really anything special. And Deadly Foes of Spider-Man, which is in around like 1990s, very early 1990s. Shocker kind of creates, or he joins a small team with the Beetle, Speed Demon, and Boomerang, right? He's trying to pull off a heist, kind of like, I kind of like look at it like the Rogues from DC, like the Flash. And in this story, he plays kind of like a Killer Moth type of role, right? He doesn't want to be the loser. He wants to build back up his respect, but he's surrounded by idiots. For Killer Moth, he was around somebody who was supposed to boost him up. For Shocker, at least, he was around villains that he felt like he was too smart for them, so he couldn't really trust them, but he wasn't brave enough to go solo. He created such a weird position for himself to be in, and they constantly double-crossed each other, right? And guess what? It ends up with Sherman being betrayed, broke, and he went back to jail, so I don't know what he was trying. Furthermore, superior foes of Spider-Man. This is really big back in the day. Very popular, and it focused on Boomerang, right? Recurring character. I'm going to talk about him in a little bit more in depth. But Shocker was the most cautious member. He didn't really trust Boomerang. He was consistently considering to back out because obviously it goes back to them trying to complete a heist. And he accidentally finds Silvermane's cybernetic head, right? And he spends half the series talking to it for advice. Oh, and he gets buried alive briefly. That happens, right? Everyone thinks he's dead. And he comes back for revenge in the final issue, and he wins. Oh my god. Dude, there's the soap opera drama that goes on the Shocker should be studied. It's so fun, bro. And this is the series that I think redeems Shocker into being one of the better Spider-Man villains without actually changing him. I think in the comics, Shocker is better written than somebody like Electro, and I think he has more good stories than Electro does. On everything I love, Shocker has more good stories than Electro. He's still awkward, he's still scared, but he survives. He ends up being one of the most human and sympathetic people in the entire cast, and that's what won a lot of people's hearts over to him. So yeah, Shocker, one of the GOATs. Now let's go into Boomerang. Pause. Now, Boomerang is one of the funniest villains. This man's origin story is so goofy. Like, he's just Captain Boomerang, but worse. Let me give you the rundown. So his name is Fred Myers, ooh. And he was a star baseball player, but he was caught taking bribes. And he was banned from the sport. So instead of changing his life, what did he do? He joined a criminal syndicate, he got some weapons, he got some clothes, he trained a little bit, and he became a supervillain. Yeah, there's no tragic loss at all, just being very insecure. He was a joke. He threw boomerangs like how 10-year-olds throw those paper ninja shurikens. That was his entire gimmick. And I guess you can't really fault him for that. Yes, you can. If I were to look at the ego to skill ratio, the ego on this man outscaled everything. There was constant backstabbing. Even other villains hated this man. He was too selfish to follow. But he was too weak to follow as well, and he's too dumb as well as to lead a plan, so there's nothing going for this guy. Going back to the superior foes of Spider-Man, he assembles a version of the Sinister Six, as I said before, but there were 5 of them. He betrays and lies and scams every single person he's around, including his teammates, including Kingpin, Chameleon, and even the readers, I guess, right? He spends a whole book trying to steal Silvermane's head, as I said before, to climb up the ranks of the underworld, and to maintain the image of a mastermind while single-handedly, constantly fumbling every single plan that's ever been made. Why he works, though, is that yes, he is a loser, but he pretends not to be, right? He's not like the Shocker who knows he is, and fully embraces it but tries to be better. He just will not let anybody tell him otherwise. The book lets you know in detail that he is all bravado, hilariously petty, and just desperate. He tries to be everything that he's not, right? At one point he dates a bartender and lies about being in the Avengers. That's how he is. In Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer, he does go on a redemption arc, which is what I love about him. He is roommates with Peter Parker in the storyline, and this is after, of course, fumbling his team. And Peter doesn't really know that he's Boomerang at first, and shockingly, what happens here is that he just doesn't become a villain. He helps Peter out, he teams up with him, he fights alongside him. Even in like a mafia war, he's by his side. He really did a full 180, and his biggest moment was in the Kindred arc, where he sacrifices himself to save the one person who believed in him, and that was Spider-Man, Peter Parker. He doesn't go out like a clown, he goes out like a hero, and that's what we love. This is my GOAT now, because I read this. I'm not even a big fan of Spencer's Spider-Man run, but what he did with Boomerang should be commendable, because they really made this villain one of my favorites. I really did enjoy him, and to kind of break down his character traits, I would say 1, delusional confidence. This man talks like Lex Luthor, but he's like, I don't know, Miss Piggy. There's nothing there to be confident about. He truly believes he deserves to be on top, but he makes it even harder for himself, and he fails miserably. He does have self-awareness, he does know that he's a joke, but he shows up and he pretends that that's not even true in the slightest. It is kind of inspiring a little bit. And 3, there's growth. He goes from being a selfish liar to a selfless friend. And I guess the best part about it is that he doesn't really undermine his humor or anything about that when he goes over to the other side. He still stays who he is, but just fighting the good fight, right? And that is the character development that I like to see. That is what we love to see, because I hate seeing big A-list villains turning into good guys without there being a good reason. Joke villains are prime candidates for a redemption story arc. They are the characters that could fully adapt to the rehabilitation mindset of these heroes. These are the villains that the Batmans, the Spider-Mans of the world should love to work with, and for there to be a lot more stories about them, because they prove that killing your villains isn't exactly the best way to go, because you can turn them into proper allies in the future. Now, I know before I was talking about I'm only going to include villains that are actually good characters, but this one gives me so much of a laugh that I need to put it on the list, and that is Stilt Man. Because Stilt Man, if you think about it, using his technology, he could have become the next Iron Man, the next Doctor Doom, but he decided, you know what, I'm just gonna build stilts on my legs, and that will be enough to take down Daredevil. The thought process is literally immaculate, like I can't argue with it. Coming from like small beginnings, you know, a jealous lab assistant to like stealing his boss's tech to commit robberies, right? This is genius. He creates a metal suit with these little like telescopic legs. He can change his height. I'm sure Kevin Hart would love to have that. And he tries to rob armored trucks and stuff like that, and he gets clowned on by Daredevil, as you might expect. He has very ambitious tech, kind of ambitious ideas, but it's a very dumb application to his resources, right? And he goes down fast because of it. One time he fights Iron Man and he goes out of his league, he gets beat up in like 30 seconds, and he's like, this isn't fair! He starts screaming as he's crashing to the ground. And we know he's cooked, but it's hard not to root for him because he's very persistent. But what does suck, and why Punisher Man, I do like you, but sometimes you go too far. He ends up killing the classic Stilt Man, right? Wilbur Day, that's what his name is, Wilbur Day. He goes to the villain bar in New York, right? If you read like Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman, you know there's spaces where villains go to hang out and where they conglomerate. He poisons his drink, waits until he leaves, and I'm pretty sure, if my brain isn't betraying me, he blows him up with a rocket launcher. Like, his only reason was because he was there. He really did that. An irrelevant bum, he just blew up. Punisher gotta chill, bro. It's not that serious, my guy. But then afterwards, in She-Hulk, what's really cool is that Carl Creel's ex-wife, who, if you don't know, Carl Creel is the Absorbing Man, right? And his ex-wife becomes Stilt Woman. I'm so scared, bro. These names, they strike fear into my heart. I'm shivering. But after he dies, the suit gets stolen by a paralegal called Turk. Then she takes over it, and she joins a legal case against superheroes. And in this, she becomes kind of a recurring gag that appears here and there, very meta, very silly. And for She-Hulk, that means it's the perfect fit. It's the perfect book for this to work. Not really as a threat, but as a recurring, kind of sitcom-y style joke that appears every now and again. In Daredevil, he goes back, because you have to remember, this is a Daredevil villain. His legacy lives on in someone else, who we don't know, upgrades the Stilt Man armor. He fights Daredevil. He looks very cool, you know, for about a minute, and he still gets stomped. No matter how modern or advanced the Stilt Man suit is, there isn't really much options there. Like, it's no one's gonna take you seriously. Where's the guns? Where's the lasers? At least if you don't want to kill anybody, where's the defensive shields at? Imagine this. You are so invulnerable. You have all of these defensive tools at your disposal that nobody can fight you. You're over here stealing money, and all the heroes around you are trying to hit you, and they just can't. And you're a Daredevil villain at the end of the day. You should be winning. It's not like you're fighting the Hulk or Thor, and you're a recurring joke villain for them. You're a joke villain for Daredevil. You're telling me you can't create a fully powered force field, or find one of those. I'm sure there's one of those laying around. It is the Marvel Universe after all. And just put it on. Daredevil wouldn't be able to have a scratch on you. He doesn't even use excessive weaponry. It's not like the Bat family who have a bunch of extra weapons they could use for different threats. Daredevil just got his sticks. If you can bypass that, you can bypass anything in his little region, and you can take as much money as you want. I guess it being a mantle joke villain does make it more fun, right? The fact that you don't know which Stilt Man you're gonna see is honestly a part of the joy, right? All of them are equally as bum as each other. They're all sorry as hell, but they're just very funny and enjoyable every single time they're on screen. For the original Stilt Man, it is a very comedy as tragedy type of situation, because there's no reason why Punisher should target Stilt Man of all characters. Where was that energy with Kingpin or Norman Osborn? You know what I'm saying? Stilt Man deserves more justice, and Frank, you rained on my parade, bro. I'm pressed as a mother. I am delusionally pressed that he did this. Like, he has There is no imagination in his brain for you to be targeting him. His most intricate plan was probably lifting up an ATM machine with his stilts to a high enough level that nobody else could reach him, so he's free to steal as much money as he wants. Like, there's no reason for you to be poisoning his drink, but alas, I'm gonna calm myself down. No beef towards you, Frank, a little bit. And we will move on to our next character before I explode. And you know, since I'm already on a roll with some of the goofiest villains of all time, let's talk about Paste Pot Pete. Now, if you watch Ultimate Spider-Man, I'm pretty sure he was like the main villain of like the first episode. He was there at the very beginning, if I remember correctly, which is funny considering that he was supposed to be a Fantastic Four villain, and nobody, the common trend, nobody respected him. And it's funny because even in She-Hulk, there's a She-Hulk comic that I talked about before with the Stilt Man and the ex-wife, that, you know, that even his lawyer doesn't respect him. Oh, I'm joking, dude. It's so funny, dude. I love how these characters just inject humor in the most like natural way possible, because I know there's other characters that you can put down just for the sake of comedy, but it doesn't really work. You feel like, why are we doing this to my favorites? These villains are literally made for the shtick, right? If they were used in the MCU more, instead of our favorites to be the butt of a joke, it would go more smoothly, I'm telling you. In Fantastic Four 36, I'm pretty sure, he changed his name to be called the Trapster because Paste Pot Pete is not exactly the most threatening thing on the planet. But when he's with legit villains, he can actually make the Fantastic Four deal with some legit trouble. He's a real chemist, real engineer. Yeah, his weapons are just glue, but joining the Frightful Four, which included the Wizard, Sandman, and Medusa, he upgraded his glue gun to a more powerful adhesive that could stop people mid-flight, and it could even pin Iron Man to the wall. So he started thinking a bit better, and everything else started working, right? The problem is that a lot of these joke villains are really intelligent, it's just that they don't use their brains. They always stick with what they already have because that's their brand. They create a horrible brand for themselves to use, and then they complain about not having any good PR. Like, it's like, you're doing it to yourself. He even invented some of the tech for other villains like Hydro Man and Wizard, so you know he has the brain capacity, and if he wanted, he could make that tech for himself, but I guess, you know, it's not gonna fit the scheme. In Identity Crisis with Spider-Man, Trapster actually helped Spider-Man clear his name after he was framed for murder, so it shows you he's actually a person who can be extremely useful for society, but he chooses to be a bad guy. Most recently, I'm pretty sure he was used in Deadpool comics as like a punchline fodder. I wasn't exactly the biggest Deadpool reader as of recent, so I can't really confirm on that. The reason why he works so well is that he's a meta humor magnet, right? He's perfect for stories that mock a lot of outdated comic book tropes because he was there in the beginning, which is probably why they used him in Ultimate Spider-Man. Like, for a meta reason, he was there at the beginning of superhero comics for Marvel, and I guess he'll be there for the beginning of this new universe, right? Ultimate Spider-Man, of course, locking in with like Hulk, Agents of Smash, Avengers Assemble. Those shows were complete garbage, by the way. But yeah, he's weirdly consistent. He's been around for 60 plus years. That's kind of dedication, you feel me? And he's somebody who looks for redemption. He's not evil in the slightest, right? As a lot of these characters I've mentioned are. I want to see a very evil joke character. That would be really funny. But he makes just bad choices. And then, like a lot of these characters who are very arrogant, he just doubles down. Imagine if this guy was a hero, though. Like, adhesive, if you think about it, is a really good restraining tool for a lot of villains, right? You don't have to think that much. If it's stronger than web shooters as well, and it could jam Iron Man systems and stuff like that, it's a really good weapon for a hero. I think that he could transition, if he wanted, to be a hero very easily by the superhero community. I'm pretty sure they would accept him. Spider-Man already worked with him. I don't think they would have that much of a problem with him. Adhesive in general, it can be used as a tool to save people from falls because it can be kind of cushiony and sticky and soft and whatever. And even maybe to stop certain disasters. Maybe there's like a fire or something. I'm sure that gun could take it out as well. So there's a lot of potential for these villains to turn their lives around, but they really don't. But what can you say? It's for the love of the game. And that's honestly all the explanation you need. But yeah, remember to comment who your favorite joke villains are. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care.